Hello and welcome. We're doing a Python video today where we're going to be looking at strings and string methods. In this video, we'll write a little program that will swap the case of a string, and then at the end of the video, you'll be given a little challenge to expand that program some. So let's jump right into the code. Over here, we have a blank file. I'm calling the string methods video. I'm going to recommend to you that you use a slightly shorter name because we will have to retype that name a couple times. But I want it to be clear, and I've got a lot of files on my system, so that's what's good for me. To begin with, we're going to start. So what we're going to be doing first with this function, with this program, let me, oh, I didn't actually switch over to code. Okay, here we go. What we're going to be doing, we're going to start with a little doc string, and in this file, we are going to ask the user for input, modify the return. So that's not a great doc string, but because what we're going to be doing throughout this video is going to change slightly, I don't want to give away too much. So excuse the brevity. All right, so what are we actually going to do? We're going to start by asking the user for a letter. So we're going to name that, we're going to store that value in a variable called start, and we're going to ask the user for input. In that input, we're going to ask the user a question that just says, please enter a letter to alter. Okay, so now we're going to start doing if statement. And depending on what the letter we get, we're going to return something different. So if start dot is, and we see, actually, let me go back to just when I do the period. When we do start dot, we get a list of all of the methods that are associated with strings. Don't worry about all of these underscore methods. That's definitely an advanced thing. That's not a first introduction to strings thing. That's a later. But we will be investigating a number of these methods. Right now, we're going to be looking specifically at upper, lower, and then is upper and is lower. So we're going to start with if start.isUpper, and strings are like functions. You have to call them with the open and close parentheses. And we're going to add our colon to let Python know that this is a continuing thought. If string.isUpper end equals start.lower. And because I added a new variable in the middle of a statement like that, I'm going to go ahead and declare this up at the top. End equals. That way we don't get an error about declaring a variable, assigning a variable before it's declared. Don't worry about that if that doesn't make sense. We'll run into that eventually. Then we're going to do an else if, because and the reason we're doing an elif instead of just an else is because it's possible that our user is not going to return a string, or excuse me, not going to return a letter. Even though we're asking a letter, they may put back a number, they may put back a punctuation or some other symbol. So we're going to check if start is lower. And between these two lines, this will do an implicit is alphabetic test, because only alphabetical characters can be uppercase or lowercase. So if start is lower, we're going to say end equals start dot upper. And so what we've essentially done here is, regardless of what letter is returned, we're going to return regardless of what letter is entered by the user, we're going to return the alternate case. But again, since the user may not enter a letter, since they have the option to enter numbers and symbols, we're going to do, at the end, we're going to do an else statement that if it is not a letter because it is not uppercase or is not lowercase, then we're just going to end equals start. And then down here, after this if statement, if block, we're just going to print end. Okay, so going through this all one more time from start to finish, we start by using the input function the built-in input function to get input from the user. And what's going to happen is it's going to print, please enter a letter. I misspelled that. Let me change that. Please enter a letter to alter. So it's going to start by printing that, and then it's going to give the user a prompt. In fact, let's go ahead and put a space here. That space will make sense when we print it. Then we're going to declare a variable end to an empty string. That's okay because we're about to overwrite end. And then we're going to start an if block. And our if block says that if start, the letter that's given to us by the user, is an uppercase letter, we're going to make it lowercase. And if it's a lowercase letter, we're going to make it uppercase. And if it's not a letter, we're going to leave it alone. And then we'll print that. So using the control backtick hotkey, I'm going to open my terminal and I'm going to run this file. I'm going to run this file by doing Python 3 and then the name of the file, which is just string methods video for me. Again, this is why I recommended to you to name yours something a little more brief so you don't have to retype so much. Interesting. That I Okay, I'm going to pause and see why that. Hello, I'm back again. That was a pretty stupid mistake on my part. I just forgot to save the file. So here I'm going to make an edit and I'm going to show you. In VS Code, you get this little white dot at the top of your file anytime you forget to save it or anytime you haven't saved it. So let's go ahead and save it. And then we'll come down here and we'll do Python 3 string. I'm just going to autocomplete that string methods py. Oh, I forgot I made an edit and then I didn't put the edit back in. So let's save that. We'll come back down here and clear this. So we have a clear one string methods py, and we'll run this and it says please enter a letter to alter. And you see, unlike with print statements, it doesn't automatically print a blank line. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put in A and hit return, and we get back a capital A. We do it again, and we enter a capital B, we get a lowercase b, and then just to show its full functionality, we'll do it one more time, and we'll enter the number 1, and we get back the number 1. So like we said, if start is upper, return the lower. That's what we did the second time. If start is lower, return the upper. That's what we did the first time. And then if start is not a letter, leave it alone. That's what we did the last time. So the first thing I want to do is I want to change this little input thing. This is a trick that I learned from Al Schweigert, the Automate the Boring Stuff guy. He does this. He's got a series on GitHub that is just a bunch of basic games that he's coded out, and the idea is that you copy the games to get practice typing code and exposing yourself to different syntaxes that are common in code. And that's where I learned this one by doing his practice. So what we're actually going to do here is we're going to take the word start out of this, and we're just going to make the phrase, we're going to, and we're going to change this word to prompt. And so now we have a string that we want to ask. And so let me actually, I need to delete, I don't need to, but for clarity, I'm going to delete these parentheses. And then we're going to add a new, excuse me, let me put this new line after it. And here we will declare our variable start, and we will do, nope, I did this wrong. I did this wrong. This is going to be correct on the start, but we need to fix prompt. So we're just going to do this for input, and then up here, instead of storing this into a prompt, what I actually meant to do is just print this directly. So let's change this to print, and then we'll put a closing on the end. And so now if we look at this, this is going to look a lot cleaner. It's going to be a lot easier on the user's eyes. So we'll open up our terminal again using that same shortcut. That's the control backtick. And then I'm going to use Control L to clear my terminal. You can also clear your terminal by typing clear. And so now if we run it, we can run it with Python 3, and then I'm going to use my autocomplete again. I have autocomplete because I'm using the fish shell. If you're using a bash terminal, you can try tab completes. Oh, and it did it again. I forgot to save. So I'm going to cancel out of that. I'm going to go back up here. I'm going to save. Now I'm going to go back to my terminal and run that one more time. This time I just used the up arrow to get my last command. That is a function that exists in bash. You can use up arrow to cycle through previous commands. So now if we run this, we get a nice cleaner. It's more obvious to the user what they're doing, what they're typing, and that this is that we're waiting for them to type something. And so here we're just going to enter a capital G, and it brings back the lowercase g as we expected. All right. So that's a real basic file. That's a Python file that works. You can run that anywhere that runs Python, and it's going to do what it does. That's not really how you normally see Python's files, though. If we go into the interpreter and we import that file, let me import, and we called that string. And I can import this file because I opened my interpreter instance. If you'll see, I opened my interpreter instance in the same location that that file is stored. So that's why I can import it by just using the name of the file without the .py. And when I do that, it automatically asks me what letter I want to alter. And so I'm going to hit A, and it exits out. And so that, generally speaking, is not the functionality we want. We do not want just when we import something for it to automatically execute. And because of that, there's a couple different things we can do. The first one is an advanced thing. There's two advanced things that I'm going to show you right now that I'm going to show you. I'm not really going to explain. We're going to get to in a couple videos, but I just want you to get in the habit of doing these things because they're just good muscle memory. So the first thing is we're going to go up to the top of the file and we're going to add a new line. And on this line, we're going to add a shebang. And that's a hashtag followed by exclamation point. Excuse me, I know how to English. And then we do, I'm on a Mac. This is the standard shebang for Mac. It's user bin onv Python 3. And so what this will do is this will tell the Python to use Python 3 and where it's located. The other thing we're going to do is we're going to go down to the bottom. We're going to go down to the bottom and we're going to add this line. It says if underscore name equals underscore main. Oh, then do main. Now, you may notice our program doesn't have a main function. So if we import this function, or now if we run this function from the command line, it's not going to do anything. That's okay because we're going to make some more changes. But I just want to mention that this is how you prevent that accidental execution. Get in the habit of writing this. But again, we'll be explaining this in greater detail in a couple videos. So now what we want to do is we want to take this functionality and we want to write it into a function so that we can call it from main. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back up to the top and we're going to start a new line and we're going to say we're going to start a new line and we're going to say def swap case. And then we do our open close parentheses and a colon. So in Python, you define functions with the def keyword. Then you give it a lowercase name. It's your name by convention. Names start with lowercases. There is a rule that names cannot start with a number. They can end with numbers. They can have numbers elsewhere, but they can't start with a number. By convention, they start with lower cases. Later on in the course, we'll talk about the things that start with uppercase letters. And then they have, like methods, they have the open and close parentheses. If there were arguments, we would put them in here, but this is a simple function that doesn't take anything special. So we just have an empty open and close parentheses, and then we have our colon to let the interpreter know that this is a continuing thought. This isn't finished. So then when we hit enter, we see that we're automatically indented. That's because of our colon. And here we're just going to take these two lines, these three lines, and you know what? We're just going to grab all of this. We're just going to grab all of this, bring it up, and indent it. And then I think that should be good. So let me grab all of this, indent it. Yeah, that's now a function. So instead of saying print at the end of this, we're going to say return function. We're going to use return and return end. Let's get rid of that. And then we'll change this to return. Okay, so now what's going to happen is when we call this function, it's going to go through all of those same steps that we did before, but instead of printing that value that we get at the end, it's just going to return it back to the interpreter. So what that means is that when we go up here and we add our main function, we're going to need to tell main what to do with that value. So let's do def main, and then we're going to say print swap case. And because we're actually calling it, we're going to give it the open close parentheses inside the print call. And we'll just put it. So now we have a main function. Let's talk about this all the way through before we run it. I'm going to save it so I don't have, undo and save. I'm going to save it so I don't have that same accident I had before. Okay, so now we have def swap case that runs exactly the same as our previous file did, our previous program did, but now it's contained in a function. And at the end of the function, it's going to return that string that we were originally printing. And then when we run our main function, we're going to run the swap case function, and we're going to print the response. So this is the way we can check that it's still working instead of just printing the way we did when it was a bare file. And now, oh, I've got a space down here I need to get rid of. This is, oh, this needed to be an equals equals if name is equivalent to main, not if name is assigned to main, excuse me. Again, this is just a standard Python thing. You don't need to worry about it too much, but we will be going over it in more in depth later in another video. So now that we have this, we can run this. We can take it back down here. We're going to exit out of the interpreter. I didn't mean to leave that there. And so I'm going to do Control L again to clear my terminal. And if we do Python 3, I'm going to use my autocomplete again. We see that because the main function was calling our swap case function, it will automatically ask us to change a letter. I'm going to give it a capital H. We're going to get back a lowercase h. But also what we can do now, this allows us to do greater testing because we can go back to the interpreter. And now if we import our file, string methods video. Now when we import our file, it doesn't automatically execute. And what we can do, since we have this as a function stored in here, is we can call this. So we can say string, this is another reason why I recommend using a shorter name for our practice, string methods video dot swap case. So before I hit enter, I'm going to explain this a little bit. When you import something, you need to use its namespace. So print is a built-in function. It just exists in Python. We don't have to say python.print. But this swap case is not a built-in function. It's something that I defined in this package, string methods video. So we need to tell Python to look into string methods video and find this function. And once we've done that, we can hit enter and it'll prompt us the same we were expecting. We can do a capital H again. We'll get a lowercase h. And then we can keep doing this as many times as we want to test the other functionalities. We'll do a lowercase h and that'll give us a capital H. And then we'll do it one more time with a symbol, do an @ symbol, and that will return an @ symbol. And so this is really useful for testing because sometimes you want to load something into the interpreter and test a bunch of different, and test a bunch of different functions in the file without going back to the command line and having to rerun the file 100 different times or 10 different times or however many different times. And then one other thing, since it is in there, since the only thing that the main function does is call the swap case, we could have also just run the main function, and that will execute in exactly the same manner. And so we'll do t, and that will give us back a capital T. Okay, so now we're going to close our terminal, and we're going to go back up here into swap case. Just changing the letter, asking for a single letter and changing it's probably not the most useful thing. So what we're going to do here now is we're going to turn this into a loop. We're going to turn this into a for loop that will loop over an entire string, and based on the individual characters, it will return the entire string swapped. So to begin with that, we're going to go up to our print statement where we talk to our user, and we're going to change this to please enter a string to alter, and we're going to ask for input. And so all of this we don't need to change. This will work just fine inside of our string. The only thing we'll need to do is we'll need to indent it once we get the string implemented. So let's insert, let's make a new line, just a blank line for clarity, and we will say for letter in string, for letter in start, because start is the variable that's holding our string, and then do these things. So that's the only thing really that we needed to add. So I'm going to grab these next few lines. Excuse me, I meant to let me grab these next few lines and just indent them once. So now we have a loop. And what this is going to do is it's going to look at each of the letters in the start variable, and it's going to run that calculation that we did before, look at what the state of the letter is, and return the alternate state. So let's take a look at that. That was a pretty easy change. But it's going to give us a much greater expanded functionality. So now if we do Python 3, I'm going to use my autocomplete again, and we do this and it says, oh, I did it again. I'm sorry, team. I'm going to Control-C to cancel and go back into my file and hit save. I promise you. Oh, and it's a good thing I did save because I'm getting a warning. I lied to you. There is a little bit of a further change we need to do. We need to change all of these starts to letter. So now if we save that, that warning goes away and this should work. So let me go back to my terminal. We'll clear my terminal. I'm just using the up arrow to get my last command. I will run this again. It says please enter a string to alter, and we'll say this is a string to alter. Clever, I know. Oh, that's my fault. That's my fault. I'm looking over here at my notes, and I forgot to scroll down. Forgot to scroll down to the next section. So, let me talk a little bit about why this went wrong and how we can change this to make it work, and what I forgot to do. So this went wrong because I'm just defining end as the last letter that we looked at. So if you look at this back here, we see we return just the period. That was the last thing I entered. So that's why it's only the period. What we need to do is we need to change these. We're going to insert to concatenations instead of reassignments. So if we make that a plus equals and make this a plus equals. So now instead of just changing the letter and returning only that single letter, what it's going to do is it's going to start with taking this empty string on the first letter. It's going to add that first letter to the empty string. And then it's every time we loop through, it's going to keep adding the new letters. So once again, let me save that. Then we'll go back down to the terminal. I'm going to clear my terminal and we'll run this using the up arrow. Please enter a string to alter. This is a string to alter. You know what? I lied. Let me do this. Let me do this different. Let me give you more capital letters so that this will be more apparent. This is a string to alter. When we return this and we see it does, it swaps each of the individual letters. That works, and the period's still there. So this is functioning. This is it. This is what we had set out to do, which was to write a function, write a program, write a function inside of a program that will swap the case of the letters, each individual letter as it comes across it. So what I would like you to do, I'm going to bring this file over from my other window. And we're going to change this a little bit because I didn't quite cover exactly what I meant to cover in this video, but we're already at 20 minutes, so I think it's a good place to cut it off. I had originally meant to talk about the command line a little bit more and talk about flags and arguments. Being as how this took this much time, I think it's going to be much better to split that into its own individual video. But what I would like you to do is still do some of this. I want you to rewrite the function that we have above. Instead of using this if else statement, this if else block, there is actually a string method that will perform this functionality. So I want you to go to Google, look up string methods, and find that string method and rewrite this function so that it will still loop over the start value. We'll still loop over the starting variable, the starting string given us by the user, and then it will return that string with the case alternated. After that, let's just write a function instead of this rewrite the program that takes flags. Let's just make this. Let me go ahead and we'll choose write the program or rewrite. Let's just make write a new function. Let's do this. Write a new function that Okay, write a new function that returns alternating letters based on even or odd index. So what I mean by that is you can choose what comes first, but if the first letter is odd and it is uppercase, I'm sorry, if you choose to make the first letter uppercase, then the second letter should be lowercase, and it should repeat like that based on whether or not the index of the letter is even or odd. But you can decide for yourself whether evens get uppercase or evens get lowercase. Then I would write, we'll change this again, write a function, write a function that will have a series of else statements in it that will look at different parameters of the string. And you can make up these parameters however you like. The purpose of this is not to meet any of my requirements, but to challenge you to explore the different string methods and the different ways you can modify text using the string methods. I have included a couple options. Um, so these are just arbitrary things. Give yourself arbitrary conditions, and then if they are met, do something to the string. So one option you could do is that if the user string has more than one word, capitalize the first letter of the second word. Um, that again, that's totally arbitrary. I just made it up, but you'll use an if statement to check how many words are in the string, and then depending on that, you'll use some other control flow to grab that second word and modify it. And again, I encourage you to look through the methods, because while you can do that using the upper method that we're already familiar with, there's another method that will satisfy this need. Another option you could do is, if a string has more than a certain number of a certain letter, return you're using too many of those. It's silly, I know, but it's just that will give you practice looking for how many times a letter occurs in a string, which is a good thing you can do. That's one of the functions of, excuse me, that's one of the methods that occurs with strings. There's something that will count the count the different objects, the different items in a letter, in a string, excuse me. So those are just two options. I want you to come up with three. Because I gave you two, you can only use one of those options that I provided. So you need to come up with two additional ones on your own. Really, I'd love it if you came up with a bunch more than that, because there's a bunch more string methods, but all I'm going to assign for now is just do three. I think that's all for now. We've looked at a lot of the basics of string methods. We've looked at how they're implemented and how you can use control flow, both for loops and if-else statements, to modify them differently. This string methods video file and then this sp.py with the prompt will both be up on my GitHub shortly, so you can check those out if you need to confirm anything or check any of these resources. And I think that is about it for today, for this video, excuse me. So we're going to go ahead and wrap it up here. We'll be back soon looking at some more functions in Python, but I think this is a pretty good introduction to string methods. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.